Thank you for joining this training. We want to first and foremost thank State Council Tamika for the collaboration in joining this, in putting together this training. My name is Mary Rios. I'm one of the senior advocates at Disability Rights California. And for those of you that don't know who Disability Rights California is, we are a public interest law firm. We are California's protection and advocacy program. We assist individuals with disabilities in a large area. We cover from special education, regional center issues, mental health issues, benefits issues, including IHSS, Social Security, Medicare. And as you can see, we do a lot of outreach. So with that, we ask if you have individual questions that you reach out to Disability Rights Intake line at 1-800-776-5746, and we will include that number in the chat. But with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Gabe. Thanks, Gabe.
Yeah, thank you, Mary, very much. And yeah, as Mary said, we are a protection and advocacy organization. We provide services for people with disabilities in a lot of different areas. Specifically, the area that I focus on, obviously, is voting, because that's what we're talking about today. And my sort of area that I cover is a lot of the counties in Southern California. So I work with different county elections officials. We serve on a number of different committees and provide the county election staff with feedback on different programs and services and new systems that they're wanting to put in place for their elections and their voting process, to make sure that they're doing everything that they can to make things accessible and easy to use for voters with different types of disabilities. So we have a small group of our voting staff that works with county elections officials throughout the state to make sure that they're doing everything they can to allow people with disabilities to be a part of the voting process. So next slide, please. So as we sort of talked about, DRC is a statewide protection and advocacy nonprofit. We were established back in 1978, and we provide services in a lot of different areas. And the particular grant that funds what we do for our voting is called the PAVA grant. So we're able to do a lot of the voting work that we do because of that grant. So next slide, please. So what we work towards is our ultimate goal is to allow somebody with a disability to be able to cast a private and independent vote. And we're getting better, we're getting closer, but it's always a work in progress. And we work with the county elections officials because there are a lot of different steps to being able to vote and being able to research and find out information on what people want to vote for. And we work to make sure that information about candidates and state bills and propositions that are being voted on, that information is as accessible as possible. And so that's the information part of it. And then with the voting experience, we really work to make sure that every step of the voting process is as accessible as it can be. Whether it's for people who vote by mail, or if it's people who go to vote in person, or if it's people who want to go and fill out their ballot at home, but drop it off at a polling place or a vote center location. And I'll go into a little bit more of that as the presentation goes on. But that's our ultimate goal, is to make sure we're doing everything we can to give people the opportunity to be able to experience the voting process as independently as possible. So next slide. So in California, every polling place or vote center must have at least one accessible voting system. And one of the things that's always a challenge that we really, really work on is making sure that those machines that should be available to all vote, any voter, but especially a voter with a disability, is that those machines are set up properly and working properly. Because if they're not working properly, then the voter doesn't have the ability to be able to use it on their own. They have to get assistance. So we really work hard to make sure that the polling place staff is doing the setup properly and providing the assistance for people who need it if they have questions during the voting process. So these voting systems are typically or should be accessible via a touch screen or through some type of audio interface. Most of the voting systems have some sort of ability to be able to use audio instructions if you are maybe a voter who's blind or low vision. Many of the voting systems have accessibility features that enlarges print or does contrast for people who have difficulty reading different types of print. So that's an option that's available. And so we just make sure that and part of the whole setup process is making sure that all of those features are plugged in and working properly. So next slide. So a little bit about the Voters' Choice Act. So back in 2018, the Voters' Choice Act began. There was a state bill that was passed, State Bill 450, that created a new model for how people cast their ballot. So it created a new way for people to cast their ballot, and it also gave them more options. So next slide. So back in 2018, there were 5 test counties that started out with this new way of voting. And in the Voters' Choice Act counties, traditional polling places were replaced with fewer vote centers. But one of the things that was really great about these vote centers is that they were open for more days prior to including in March of this year, voters had 11 days total, including election day, to be able to go and cast their ballot at any vote center in their county. So if a registered voter wanted to go, if they were busy doing some shopping, or if they were at having lunch with a friend and they just decided, I want to go and drop off my ballot or go to vote in person, they could do that by going to their closest vote center. They didn't have to go to one assigned polling place that they were given, that they were assigned back when they were doing just traditional polling places. So beginning in 2020, in March of 2020, for the primary, 10 additional counties, including LA County, adopted the Voters' Choice Act. So So a total of 15 counties now have the Voters' Choice Act model that have these vote centers in place of polling places. So next slide. So one of the things that's going to be a little bit different in November because of all of the restrictions with COVID-19, they've had to change the structure of voting in the Voters' Choice Act counties. So as I said, for March, voters had a total of 11 days to be able to go and vote at any vote center in their county. And so voters will still have the ability to be able to go to any vote center they choose in November, but there will be fewer sites that will be available, and they will only be open for a total of 4 days prior to Election Day, or excuse me, 3 days prior to Election Day, so 4 days total. But you can still, as I said, you can still go to vote at any vote center in your county. So the other thing that is really great or important to remember is that the governor signed an executive order back in March that, or excuse me, back in May, that required that all registered voters would be automatically sent a vote by mail ballot. So if you are a registered voter, be on the lookout for a vote by mail ballot in your mailbox. And you have the ability to be able to fill that out at home, and then you can mail it back. Counties will be providing a prepaid stamped envelope for you to be able to do that. Or you can go and drop it off at any one of the vote centers or Dropbox locations in your county. So next slide. So people will also be able to register to vote or update their voter registration at a vote center, even on Election Day. And you can still cast a conditional or a provisional ballot. So you still will be able to register and complete your ballot on the same day if you're interested in registering to vote, even on Election Day. So that's really important to know, but you do have to be able to go in person to go to a vote center. So, and voters will be able to vote in multiple languages. The voting machines, the voting systems are able to accommodate different languages. So when you arrive at the vote center, if you need a ballot in a different language, just let them know that, and they will be able to provide the ballot in the correct language for you. And as I said earlier, voters with disabilities can use one of the accessible voting machines at any vote center location, because all vote centers should have accessible voting system available to you. So next slide. So as I mentioned, the executive order signed by Governor Newsom requires that all counties send every registered voter a vote by mail ballot automatically for the November 2020 general election. And the order also did include the requirement that counties should be providing voters some in-person voting location options. As I said before, there won't be as many as were available for voters in March, but they will still have them available. And most of the counties, actually all of the counties, should have the list available to you. You should get them in your voter information packet, and many of them are also including the list of the polling places and vote centers online as well. The in-person voting options, as I said, still will include the accessible voting systems. The counties are right now in the process of doing a lot of research on how to set up the polling places and vote centers in a way that's not only accessible, but safe for voters. So they're in the process of doing a lot of that planning right now. So next slide. So this is just a little bit more information about the details of the executive order. So as I said before, every registered voter should automatically, whether you live in a Voters' Choice Act county or not, you should automatically receive a ballot in the mailbox. So if you don't, you can always contact your local county elections office, or we have a hotline number that we can provide you all maybe Monica, if you don't mind putting that number in the chat so people have that, but we can provide that assistance for you if you come the first middle of October. If you have not yet received your vote by mail ballot, you can always contact our office and we can follow up and see what's going on. So next slide. So the vote by mail ballot initiative was signed into law by the governor as a way to ensure the health and safety of voters. The other thing that they're still working on how to make the information available, but it will be available in most counties. The option for people, specifically voters with disabilities, but they're in discussion about how to make this service available for all voters. It's called Remote Accessible Vote by Mail, and it allows somebody to be able to use their own assistive technology on their home computers to be able to mark and review and then print out their ballot from their home computer. And so if you're interested in doing that, RAVBM, that process, you can just contact your local county elections official and say that you're interested in doing this, and they will send you information about the process. And you should get information about it in your voter information packet that gets sent out as well. But in the packet, if you are doing remote accessible vote by mail, you will receive a prepaid stamped envelope. And many of the counties, we've worked with them to ensure that for any voter who may be blind or low vision, they provide signature holes to indicate where voters need to sign on the outside of the outside of the envelope. So, but if you're interested in doing that, just reach out to your local county elections office and they will send you some information on how to do that process. Next slide. So because of the current pandemic restrictions, there will be changes made to the voting options for November. Most of the counties should have the information available on their websites, but they should also include a list of where the locations are, whether they're vote centers or polling places, that information should also be available in your voter information packets. So just be aware of that. But if you want some, want to follow up with your county elections office to verify where would be best to find that information, you can always contact them directly. But DRC is currently involved with the discussions with county elections staff statewide to ensure that the in-person options are both safe and accessible for voters with disabilities. So, next slide. So a little bit about how voters can get assistance. You are allowed to get assistance from pretty much anyone unless they are an agent of your employer. So if they're like a supervisor or some staff at your employer, you can't get assistance from agent of your employer or if you are a member of a union. So just be aware of that. But you can get assistance from family member, friend, and or even a poll worker or a vote center staff worker. So they're trained to be able to provide assistance to voters with disabilities if they need assistance at when they go to vote in person. So, but you cannot get assistance from more than 2 people. So just to be aware of that. Next slide. So you should, if you are returning a vote by mail ballot, every registered voter in their voter information packet, if you're a vote by mail ballot, or excuse me, a vote by mail voter, you will be receiving a prepaid stamped envelope, and the ballots must be postmarked on or before Election Day. So just be aware of that. And so you can complete your vote by mail ballot. You may also designate someone to return your ballot to you in person on your behalf. So all the person would have to do is they would just have to sign their name and then provide some sort of identification when they're dropping off their ballot to verify that they are the person who signed the outside of the envelope. But that is totally fine. So the voter must write their name, the name of the person on the return envelope who will be returning their ballot on their behalf. And then, yeah, as I said, they should just provide some sort of identification at the polling place or vote center. So, next slide. So curbside voting is also another really helpful option for voters with disabilities. It allows somebody to be able to drive up and what happens is a poll worker or a vote center worker will bring a ballot out to the person in their car. Or if, say, you're maybe in a scooter or motorized or an electric wheelchair, and you just, for whatever reason, it's difficult for you to get in to the vote center, to the polling place. There either will be signage of outside the building saying, if you're interested in curbside voting, please contact, and then they will give a phone number. Other counties, it sort of varies. Sometimes they will have that signage. Sometimes they will do like a little doorbell. It's like a little buzzer that rings inside the polling place, and then that notifies somebody inside the staff inside the polling place, and then they will bring a ballot out to you. But we've been working with a lot of the counties to provide both the signage option and the doorbell option for just to ensure that voters are being assisted who are interested in curbside voting. But I always recommend to folks, if you are interested in curbside voting, maybe just if you have a cell phone available, great. And then, or if you have a family member or a friend who could lend you a cell phone, just to be able to have access to a cell phone if you're needing to call the number that they list on the sign. So next slide. So yeah, as I said, there should be information. There's a variety of a variety of ways to complete the process, and so either they will have signage or this electronic doorbell. But if you're wanting to get more information about what your specific county does, you can always contact them directly and see what the process is and how it works in your county. So next slide. So let me just pause for a minute and ask if there are any questions that people have at this point. I've kind of shared a good bit of information with you all, but just want to pause and see if anybody has any questions.
Nothing from me, Gabe, thanks.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, please feel free to interrupt if any of you have questions at this point, or throughout the presentation. So one of the things that we work with, DRC works with specifically, is voters who may be under a conservatorship but are interested in knowing more about their voting rights. So for voters, there are certain requirements that people need to meet to be eligible to vote. So you have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to be to be able to vote in the state of California. You have to be a resident of California. You must be 18 years of age or older on election day. You cannot be in prison or on parole for a felony. And you must also not have been found currently mentally incompetent by a court of law. So next slide. So State Bill 589 came about because there was a lot of incidents where voters who were conserved were having their right to vote taken away automatically. So the recent changes in the state law have altered this determination and have allowed many people the possibility of regaining their right to vote. So just a little bit about the background of SB 589. So next slide, please. So when establishing the conservatorship, a court must find clear and convincing evidence that a person cannot communicate with or without reasonable accommodation a desire to participate in the voting process. So if they are unable to communicate that, a willingness or an understanding or a desire, then that disqualifies them from being eligible to vote. So so next slide, please. So someone who is conserved, they can always check with the county. First, they check the order appointing a conservator. There should be a section that says whether or not a conservatee has been disqualified from voting. And so if the box is not checked, then they are eligible to vote. You can also check with your county elections office they should have record of whether or not a voter is eligible to vote. And you can also, a voter can also contact their regional center and ask their case manager to follow up on this question as well. So the thing that's really important to remember is that the conservator does not control the right to vote. So that's really, really important to keep in mind during this process. So it should be, there should be a clear evaluation of the conservatee to determine whether or not they understand what it means to vote. So next slide, please. So someone can always petition the court to have their order of conservatorship reviewed. So the judge will determine if, by clear and convincing evidence, the person cannot communicate a desire to participate in the voting process. So they should be, unless the person is found incapable of communicating that desire, the person's right to vote will be restored. And we've worked with voters, individuals in the past who have wanted to petition and to have their right to vote evaluated, and some who have even had it reinstated. So it's really important if you or you yourself or someone that you know or work with is conserved and may be interested in having their right to vote evaluated and possibly reinstated if it has been taken away. Please feel free to reach out to us, and because we can always assist with that process. So,
Hey, Gabe. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah,
No,
no.
I was just, curious how long that whole process takes, right? If somebody does, want to apply for this. I mean, it seems like it's a long process to be reviewed.
It kind of depends. I mean, I personally have never worked. We've worked in the early stages with some clients who have contacted us, but it can take a little while. I'm not entirely sure in terms of exact time, but it can be a number of months to get that because it often involves, if DRC is assisting, oftentimes we will meet with the client and determine whether or not they, just meet with them, kind of get to know them a little bit and talk with them about their right to vote and what it means. And because a lot of times what typically ends up happening is that we are contacted by families, either family members or somebody who works or knows the client directly. And then it's the process of us meeting with the client, getting to know them, talking about voting and what it means to them. And then we, from there we then, work with the client if they are still interested in getting looking into getting the rights restored. But it can be a number of months.
So what happens if election day rolls around and it's still under review? Will they still be given the opportunity after the fact, I guess, within a certain time frame?
Yeah, so I mean, if it's one of these things where, obviously if they're still in review, they won't be eligible to vote in that particular election if election day is passed. But, we work, the hope is, and we've had it happen a couple of times, where families have contacted us, maybe a month or two before election day. And so, I mean, we would encourage, if families are interested in looking into this, or individuals who are conserved, and you're interested in possibly voting in the next election, to contact us as soon as you can.
Sure.
So we can, get the process started. So.
Thanks, Gabe.
Yep. So next slide. So one of the things that, questions that we often get asked is what are some helpful resources to get more information on, whether it's candidates or ballot measures. One of the things that happens a lot in elections out here is, and if any of you all voted in the 2016 election, there were state propositions that appeared on the ballot. And the difficult part with a lot of the ballot measures is that it's oftentimes to really get an understanding of what the ballot measures are asking for, because the way that they're written can be kind of confusing to really get a sense of what you're really voting for. So there are a number of online resources available for people. We'll, in the next coming up slides, I'll list some of those, but one of the best pieces of advice that I always share with people is that first and foremost, don't feel like you ever have to vote for everything on your ballot. You can literally go in, open up your ballot if you're doing vote by mail, or if you're voting in person. You can open up the ballot, and you can vote for just one thing. If there's one thing, maybe it's a candidate that you feel really passionate about, or one ballot measure, if it's a state proposition about a certain program. All you only have to feel like you should vote for the things that you really feel are important. So if it's one thing or maybe two things, you can vote for those two things and leave the rest of your ballot blank, and your ballot will still be counted. So that never feel like, if you're only voting for a few things and there are a lot of things that you feel unsure about, or you don't feel like you have enough information to make a good decision about, that's fine. You can leave those things blank. So I always encourage people to remember that, because I myself have done that, where I've gone in and there have been 3 or 4 ballot measures that I don't know enough about, or maybe it's a local candidate that I don't, a local contest that I don't totally feel comfortable voting for any of the candidates. So I leave those blank. And I encourage people, if you don't feel comfortable and sure enough about those choices, to feel free to leave those blank. But for voters who do go in person to vote, you can bring notes with you. You can bring your sample ballot with you. You can even complete your sample ballot, like make choices on your sample ballot of the candidates that you want, and bring that into the voting booth, and be able to just mark down those choices that you made at home. And that's totally fine. So yeah, just always remember that you can bring notes with you and materials with you if you go to vote in person. and, you know, never feel like you have to vote for everything on your ballot. So next slide. So these are some helpful resources for people, and they have a lot of different information, each of these online resources. So the first is the Secretary of State's website. That's helpful to get information, especially, excuse me, in this day and age, with all of the social distancing and COVID-19 restrictions that are in place right now. It's helpful because they provide regular updates on what's going on statewide. So it's always really a helpful way to get up-to-date information on any new developments. So, and then the second one, Voter's Edge, is a really great resource for to get information about local contests. So you just type in when you go to the website, you just type in your registered mailing address, and it will call up all of the information on the local contests and all of the local propositions or ballot measures that are specific to your county area. So that's really great to get very specific information on local candidates and local contests. So, and then voterschoice.org is a great resource for any voter who lives in a Voters' Choice Act county, because it provides a lot of really helpful information on on things to know if you live in a Voters' Choice Act county. It also includes a lot of really great background information about the Voters' Choice Act and sort of the history of it, and you know, the impact that it has on the counties that are now using this new voting model. So, and then the last website is a really, really great resource for voters who are interested in getting some more information about the propositions. So easyvoterguide.org is a website that is put out by the League of Women Voters. So they have hard copies available of their Easy Voter Guide that they send out to people or they make available to people. But it has a really, really great breakdown of all the ballot measures, and it gives a really helpful description about the background, sort of the history of each ballot measure, and then it gives a really great explanation of, if you vote for something, here's what that will do. And then if you vote against something, if you vote no against something, here's what it will mean. And so it's a really great way of breaking down the proposition in a way that's easy to understand. Because as I said before, the confusing part about a lot of those propositions and those ballot measures is the way they're written makes it hard to understand what you're really voting for. So sometimes when you vote for something, it means you're actually voting against something. And sometimes when you're voting against something, it means you're voting for it. So it just, the Easy Voter Guide is a really great way to kind of help make that more simple and easy to understand what it is you're voting for. So, next slide. So at this point, I've thrown a lot of information at you all, but I'm available now for questions if any of you have them. Please feel free to ask away, or if you feel more comfortable, you can always, my contact information is right here. If you have questions that you think of later on, please feel free to reach out to me.
I see no questions in the chat, Gabe.
All
I
right.
don't know if anybody has any questions.
No, this is Tamika, just more of a comment. It was an excellent presentation, and I think it's going to be very helpful to those. I'm really glad you guys are recording it. I think it's going to be helpful to the community, so we can share the recording. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Tamika, as I explained earlier, you know, one of the things that we do is because of sort of the ever-changing elections, you know, how elections are going to look come November, because, you know, this is what the plan is currently, but things may change yet again before November. So we would be more than happy to provide an updated presentation, or you know, just share some information with you if there are any new developments as it gets closer to November. If that's of any interest, please feel free to reach out to us.